The new game mode, Siege, is out, and I have been grinding that mode. I have some really good tips for you all on how to master Siege, so let's get into it. Alright, so I'm going to give you my best tips to do really well in Siege, but actually I'm also going to include a quick Brawler ranking for Siege. I usually take a whole video to do that, but I'm going to do that really quickly and tell you who I think the best Brawlers are for Siege. And make sure to sub up if you don't want to miss any more sweet tips on all this new stuff that's coming. As soon as Siege came into the game, I have been putting hours and hours just playing that mode. Honestly, it's so fun. I completely love Siege. I think it's a fantastic new game mode. Even before it was live in ladder, I was playing it in friendly battle for a couple hours, just playing it with other people. And then once it came out in ladder, of course, I had to keep on playing it there versus real ranked matches. And it is so much fun. I think through all that experience, I have some really good tips for you all, and I have a really good grasp on who the best Brawlers are for Siege and what the best overall strategies and tactics that you really want to do in order to be consistently successful in this new game. Now, there's a couple things you definitely want to keep in mind for Siege, but there's two main things. If you take anything away from this video, there's two main things you really need to keep in mind. One, general control of the middle of the map is one of the most important things in Siege. You don't need to be dominating, you don't need to be getting a ton of kills, but general control of the map in the middle is super important. Second thing is, when you do get a robot, you want to make a concerted team push, really big team push, and I'm going to go into that because there's a couple things you definitely need to keep in mind for that. But first of all, for Siege, look, the overall objective is for you to get as many bolts as possible to get as big and strong of a robot as possible. Now, the health of the robot doesn't change as it gets to higher levels, but it moves faster and it does more damage at higher levels. So it's definitely very important to get a higher level robot so it just completely overwhelms them. One of the best ways to win in this mode is to just completely overwhelm the enemy with a push that's just so strong they can't stop it and everything just falls apart. You want it to snowball to success. This isn't a game mode where you want to do a lot of chip damage. You should never, unless you're going for the win, you should never be going for chip damage on the safe without a robot in front of you. You should never be doing that unless you're trying to get the win. There's like 10% left on the enemy safe or something like that, and you know they're going to be getting robots, so you have to be going for that damage. That would be the time you would do it. Otherwise, you should never be crossing that enemy semicircle line unless you have a robot in front of you. Now look, one of the best tips I can give you for getting control of all of the bolts in general is you want to spread out as a team. You don't want to be grouping up too much because those bolts spawn randomly, and you want to have control of each area of the map so you can get the bolts as quickly as possible. If you can just be the closest one to the bolts first, a lot of times you're able to get that bolt first, and at the least you can walk away. One thing in this mode is it's more so about who can get the bolts and then stay alive more than anything else. It's not about getting kills. It's not about destroying the enemy. All you got to do is run in, get that bolt, and run back out. Now, of course, you can't be just doing that. I think a really good way to actually approach the center of the map is kind of treat it like it's gem grab. You treat the center of the map like it's gem grab. You just want to control the gem mine. But in this case, there's sort of 3 gem mines. You want to have people spread out so you can get all the gems, aka bolts, that pop up whenever they spawn. Now, team comp in Siege is actually really important and can decide who wins and lose in a lot of different games. It's a big factor in this mode for a couple reasons. One, you really want to focus on brawlers that have high burst damage, high damage per second in this mode. Also, having a good amount of health is also a big bonus. Of course, there's other utility things like being able to have really good control, or spawners can also be really good, and I'll explain why. First of all, high burst damage is really important for a couple reasons. One, tanks are good in this mode, so in general, having high burst damage versus tanks is really good, so you can be able to take them out and not let them completely overwhelm you. But on top of that, if the enemy team ever gets a robot, it has so much health, so you really want to get that robot down as quickly as possible so you can limit the amount of time the enemy can attack your safe. On top of that, you also want high burst damage because when you attack the enemy safe, you want to get rid of their safe health as fast as possible too, So if you can deal damage faster, well, you're gonna get that health down faster as well. Now, I said earlier, making concerted team pushes is really important in this mode, and I want to expand on that. First of all, whenever you get a siege robot, you get a huge robot, you spawn, and it's gonna start marching towards the enemy safe. First of all, make sure all of you stay alive. You want to be able to stay alive because if you die, you will be late respawning, and by the time you get back to the enemy safe, your robot will most likely be either dead or almost dead, and you will have not contributed to the safe push for the enemy or on the enemy safe. So you want to make sure you stay alive. Once you get that robot, make sure everyone stays alive so you can push as a whole team together. Another thing is consider really saving your supers for that safe push. If you know that countdown is ticking down, you got 15 seconds left, 20 seconds left, save your super. And unless you know you're gonna get it back right away or really soon, I would really recommend saving it so you can just make an even bigger push on the enemy safe. If you can just kill all the enemies and have multiple people on your team attacking the enemy safe, it will be almost unstoppable, and you will deal so much damage, and they will just not be able to compete. This is where I'm saying the snowball effect is so important. Now, another thing to keep in mind is if you're not able to take out that safe with that push, make sure you fall back. As soon as you see that robot on your team, his health is starting to dwindle down, it's in the thousands, you got to start falling back, start getting behind the semicircle line. It's fine if one of you dies and just goes for extra damage, but you definitely don't want to have more than one of you die. As I was saying, control of the center map is the most important thing. So instead of sacrificing yourself and giving the enemy team control of the center, start falling back so you can start spawn trapping the enemy. Spawn trapping the enemy is incredibly important in this mode, and it's going to be part of the key to getting as many bolts as possible. So when you do win that first push, you get the first robot and you get them in their spawn, you're dealing damage, make sure you start falling back before you start getting targeted by the enemy turret or safe turret, whatever it is. One small thing to know is as a tank, you really don't want to be supering on the enemy safe because one, it attacks the closest, whoever it is, the closest enemy, it will attack. So if you super on the enemy safe, it's gonna attack you instead of your robot, and that's not good because it will destroy you. It does so much damage so fast, you don't want it. If you can keep in mind those two main principles, taking control of the center of the map and keeping control of the center of the map and making concerted team pushes, you will do really well in this mode. Also, too, if you stick around and figure out who the best brawlers are, you'll do even better. Okay, now I actually ranked all brawlers, not including Carl because he's not out yet, 1 to 22, and put them in tiers. And I'm going to go over it really quickly, a lot faster than I normally do because I want to make sure this doesn't take too long. I'm also going to be mentioning 3 maps, the only 3 maps that are out for Siege. Nuts and Bolts, which has a little bit of water, some assembly required, which is the map that was showed in the sneak peek gameplay, and Bot Drop, which is more of a long-range map. Now, some assembly required and Nuts and Bolts are really similar as far as what brawlers are going to build those maps. They both have a decent amount of grass and a decent amount of walls. Going to be more close-range oriented, and Bot Drop is going to be more long-range oriented with it being a lot more open, and the jump pads, but actually that doesn't really help tank that much in this map. All right, now you're going to notice a lot of brawlers low in this ranking have really low damage per second. They don't do enough damage, and as I was saying, it's very, very important in this mode. So that's going to be one of the main factors. First of all, there's actually no there's no F tier brawlers in this ranking. I think in Siege, it's actually super team comp specific, and you can actually just play really well strategy wise and overcome some of the brawler weaknesses that I think shows up in this mode. It's much more team oriented, I feel like. So I at the moment don't think there's any F tier brawlers. That may change with a little bit more experience. Let's start out with the D tier. I got 5 brawlers, 6 brawlers in this tier. Number 22, worst brawler for Siege, Mortis. Look, the one reason you might think Mortis is good is because he can dash in and out getting bolts. But if that's all you are doing, you are completely letting the enemy get control of the map. You're not dealing damage to them, not that much. And 2, Mortis sucks versus the enemy boss. And he's not going to get much damage to the enemy safe. 2 horrible things. He's worse. 21, Piper. Piper is actually okay on Bot Drop, the long-range map, but I still don't recommend her. She doesn't have enough damage per second. Her reload is too slow. Piper is a decent one-on-one killer, but in a mode like this, it doesn't work very well. She doesn't do that much damage to safe. He doesn't have nearly enough damage to be good versus the enemy bot robo. Also, too, the other 2 maps are really bad for Piper, so she's going to be not ranked high. 20, Tara. Similar reason, very low damage per second, just not that great in this mode. Too low health, not enough damage, not going to cut it. At 19, Poco, too low damage. Poco can be a decent support brawler in this mode because you might be running a decent amount of tanks, so you can use it to make a bigger push on the enemy safe. So it can work, but I still don't recommend it because Poco's damage is way too low and you're going to rely on your teammates a lot if you are running a Poco. At 18, it's going to be Crow. Look, Crow, his damage per second is just way too low. His health is way too low in a mode where people are going to be using walls a lot to make it hard for Crow to get a lot of poke damage. This is a really bad mode for him. I do not recommend it. All right, now we're out of the D tier and we're at number 17, actually. We're all the way up to Gene. Gene is my first C tier brawler. Look, his damage per second is way too low, so he's not that good, but he has some other abilities that are not that bad. He can use that super through walls, which is sweet and kind of useful, especially in a mode like this. Makes it really difficult to avoid him, and you can use your teammates to really control the map with that Gene super. He also has a not bad star power now, but he just doesn't have nearly enough damage, so it's hard for me to rank him that much higher. At 16, it's going to be Shelley. Look, Shelley, it's not a great mode for her. Yes, there are tanks, so she can counter them to a degree. If you're only running her to be a tank counter, you're gonna have a really bad time whenever you don't face tanks, which might happen a good amount. Another thing to keep in mind with Shelley is she a lot of times gets her damage by being able to get really close to enemies and surprising them potentially. She's not going to surprise people in this mode. In this mode, there's not enough grass to really be super sneaky in a lot of different situations. A lot of times people know where they are, and the bolts don't really ever spawn in grass, so it's not going to completely work like that. Shelley isn't able to be quite a sneaky in this mode. People are a lot more cautious of her than they would be in some other places where she can maybe flank it around, and she's not really going to be able to flank in this mode. At 15 is going to be Barley. Now, Barley got a buff recently, but this is actually a really bad mode for him. He has some maps on this mode that actually suit him pretty well, but his damage is just way too low. A lot of times you can walk through his shots, take a couple of his shots, and walk back and go away. And that's fine with you. You're fine with taking a couple of Barley shots because you got the bolts, and it's not a big deal. And then, too, now you have an enemy robot coming down, and that Barley just doesn't do that much damage at once. And look, Barley is a control brawler, but he doesn't have burst damage. And you need burst damage in this mode to be really successful. Barley just doesn't quite have it. 14, it's going to be Leon. Look, Leon's been hit with the nerf bug a lot recently, and he's just not quite what he used to be anymore. He's okay. He's not that bad, especially on the long-range map bot drop. But otherwise, this honestly just isn't a great mode for him. I probably wouldn't play him that much unless you're playing him on bot drop. At 13, and the last in the C tier, it's actually going to be Colt. Now look, bot drop, the long-range map, is actually a good Colt map, but the other two are really bad. Colt's shot is just way too inflexible. There's too many walls in the way for Colt to be really successful. Now, he can be decent late game, and he does have high damage. That's why he's all the way up at 13, but it's going to be the C tier because he has two maps that are really bad for him, and I would prefer not playing him because he is just going to completely lose way too many times and allow the enemy to get way too many bolts, and it's just not going to work out well. All right, we're now in the B tier, and at number 12, it's going to be Bo. Now, Bo got some buffs recently. He's not that bad. He doesn't have high burst damage, but it's his mines that I really like in this mode, especially on the two maps that are not bot drop, the two closer range maps with a lot of walls. He can really use those mines really well to get really good control on the map, and it makes it really difficult to just advance through any particular situation. And honestly, it's his mines. It's the main reason I think he's pretty good in this mode. Otherwise, he's not that great. At 11, it's going to be Dynamite. Now, Dynamite as a thrower, the maps are decent for him, like I was saying with Barley, but Dynamite is a much better killer. He has better burst damage, and he can do much better at getting control of the map by dealing high damage and pushing people away. At 10, it's going to be Rico. Look, Rico, not a great mode for him because he's kind of low health, so he's not going to win a lot of different situations, but he has good damage, really good damage, and there's a lot of walls that he can utilize decently well. He might get in situations where he's too close to enemies and it's hard to avoid them, but for a lot of different times, you can do pretty well avoiding enemies and dealing a good amount of damage overall. At 9 and in the B tier, it's going to be Spike. Spike actually generally one of the best brawlers in the game. This is not his best mode. He's definitely good here, but he suffers from his low health. Having a higher amount of health in this mode is definitely somewhat important, so you can use those walls, utilize them, and take the chance and go out and get those bolts when you can. If you have really low health and you can die in potentially 2 shots, like Spike can, it can be really dangerous, and if you get hit once or twice, you can completely lose control of that area of the map, and that just doesn't work out really well for Spike. He has good damage, he has good versatility, he's really well-rounded. It's just his health isn't enough for this mode to make him really successful. Now we're at number 8, and in the A tier, it's gonna be Brock. Now Brock is really good on bot drop, one of the best brawlers on that long range open style map. He's also good because he has a really wide area of control super that does break down walls as well, and it's super good during pushes on the enemy safe because people definitely tend to group up in trying to kill the robot and defend their safe while you're attacking it, so he can put a lot of damage. Top of that, Brock is one of the best at doing chip shots in this mode. He can go in and just do a couple shots, not without a robot really, unless you're just doing it and you're planning to suicide, and then he can definitely do that pretty well. But he can get a lot more damage on the enemy safe than other brawlers can. All right, now we got Tank's row. At 7, it's gonna be Bull. At 6, it's gonna be El Primo. And at 5, it's gonna be Daryl because Daryl's the best. You could switch Bull and El Primo, and I would be fine with either one. Look, tanks are really good in this mode. Having that high amount of health is really important for a couple reasons. One, you need control of that area, and people have to come towards you. In this mode, there's a lot of one-on-ones, and tanks can win close range one-on-ones pretty consistently, so it's very important. On top of that, they can use that high health to utilize and get extra bolts when they really need it and make those pushes. On top of that, they have a super that can allow them to get closer to the enemy safe, so if they die, they can come back in the action even quicker. But mostly it's because they just tend to be a one-on-one matchup problem. A lot of brawlers cannot tank super high health tanks one-on-one by themselves if they are behind a wall, in the grass, stuff like that, and there's going to be a lot of situations where that happens. Now, you're probably not going to want to play those brawlers except for Daryl if you're playing on bot drop, because it's just a little bit too long range of a map. Yes, there's grass on the sides, but trust me, you want to stick to more long range brawlers on that map. Otherwise, those tanks are really good in Siege. Now at 4, and the last A tier brawler, it's going to be Nita. As I was saying earlier, spawners are really good in this mode. Look, Nita can offer really good control. Nita's just a great brawler overall right now in general. She's really good on a lot of these different maps, can match up well versus a variety of different brawlers. That bear is super good at helping you get control of the middle of the map. Or if you're making a push on the enemy safe, it can make it that much harder for you to be stopped, and you can completely take out the safe. Nita is a beast in this mode. Now we're in the S tier brawlers. These brawlers are overpowered for this mode, I think, and you will see them a lot in competitive meta for this mode. I think they're super strong. I also think they make up the best team overall. So if you're looking for the best team for Siege, I would really recommend these 3 brawlers. Now there could be maybe a better team, especially for bot drop, and I'll get into that. But look, actually, let's get into it right now. At number 3, it's gonna be Frank. Now, Frank on bot drop is not very good. Well, he's okay. He's not very good at the center of the map, but Frank is an absolute beast when you are attacking the enemy safe, no matter the map. So I might not recommend Frank on bot drop. There are probably better options, but he's still a good option. But on the other 2 maps, Frank is, if not the best option, the second best option on the other maps. Frank is an animal. First of all, he's so hard to deal with. He only takes 3 hits to charge his super, and there's so many walls where he can hide behind. And if he has his super and he's behind a wall, what are you supposed to do? You have this beast of a Frankenstein mammal who has so much health, has a super that stuns you, has such a long range, breaks down walls. What are you supposed to do versus that animal? There's not much you can do. There's a couple situations maybe, but the majority of the time, it's just not going to work out well for you unless you have your teammates helping you out. So Frank is an animal in this mode. On top of that, even better, when you are pushing on the enemy safe, Frank is one of the best at making that huge push so much more successful. His stun not only works on enemies, but it works on that turret as well. And that's so important because that turret does so much damage. So when you stun that turret, it's really, really useful because you're damaging it and you're stunning it, and it does so much damage. On top of that, a lot of times people tend to group up when they're trying to kill the enemy robot and defend you and stop everything from going on. So you can not only hit the safe, but you can tend to hit 1 or more people at the same time. And Frank is amazing in this mode. He's not great on bot drop because it's more of a long range map. He's not going to be great at getting all the bolts. He still is really good once that boss robot is out. On top of that, he's also really good at stopping the enemy robot because he can stun it, and it's just so important. And if you have a Frank on your team who has super, it's really hard for the enemy to push through that because it's such a long super, and it goes through walls, it goes through the robot, and it's just completely devastating. So Frank is a beast in this mode. At 2, it's Pam. Look, Pam, really, really strong, small nerf, but one of the best control brawlers in the game. Really high health, really good burst damage. Pam is a beast in this mode. I don't think I need to explain it that much. At number 1, it's going to be Jessie. Jessie is an animal in this mode. Like, she is amazing. There's so many bounce shot potential in this mode, but also her turret is really good at grabbing control of the map. And if you throw that turret down on the enemy safe or near the enemy safe when you have a robot going, you can just put devastating damage out. And if you ever star power, you can keep that turret alive and get bounce shots on the enemy safe and then get a bounce shot on someone else. It's just so strong. On top of that, she can bounce shots off the enemy robot and it can really stop pushes really well. She can keep her turret alive. That's distracting the enemy robot. Jessie is the best brawler for Siege. That's gonna be it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you later.